everyone. We're your hosts, Beth Moore,
and Bridget Carnes.
and this is Click Moments in Passionate Pursuits, The Unfolding, where intuitively guided conversations are followed with feral faith, enthusiasm, and joy, bringing new insights, inspiration, and perspectives along the way. And today, we're going to be talking about our health. It's something that we all have to deal with. We have health challenges. We have periods of time where we are in the wonderful state of feeling well, but it's common for us to go in and out of having health issues. And one of the topics that we've been discussing recently is how do we balance having optimism, especially when you have like concepts like the law of attraction that talk about the importance of mining our thoughts, because what we're thinking attracts more of that into our life. And sometimes it can be a challenge for us to think about what's the balance between maintaining this optimism and also being realistic about where we are in the course of what's happening within our bodies. So that's our topic today: is how do we approach that and continue to try to have more sustained health in our lives. So Bridget, you got some intro thoughts for us on this topic?
Yeah, so I brought this up because something that has really plagued me over the years, especially since I started doing the inner work to heal myself, starting with my mind and what I was thinking and believing about myself, was that I was having trouble reconciling being honest about the conditions that I live with every day, and also understanding that my words are extremely powerful and that my words spring from the beliefs that I hold about myself. So it's difficult for me still, and I think we'll work through this a bit as we speak today, but it's difficult for me still to understand the fact that I have at least two diagnosed chronic conditions that cause a decent amount of pain and other things that crop up from time to time, and also to not speak about them in terms of claiming them for myself, but to speak honestly and openly about what I struggle with, but also remind my body that it is healed and whole and well, and live in that space instead of the space of this chronic disease that's going on in my body. So I brought up this topic and I wanted to talk more about it because I think that it's something that a lot of us who are mindful of the power of our words really struggle with. Like we really value authenticity and honesty. So in being authentic and honest, I want to share the struggles that I have with people, but I also don't want more of those struggles. So how do I do that? How do I do that in a way that is authentic and honest and also mindful of the power of my words? So that's where we're jumping off today.
Yeah, it's a great intro because I feel like when you were talking, I started to think about like it also depends who you're in front of speaking to.
Mm,
So there have been people in my life that have said, "Listen, I don't bring up I don't bring up conditions to certain people because they'll jump on that bandwagon. They'll start talking about every condition that they have, every pill they take, every doctor's appointment they have." The question that I always have when I'm thinking about who I'm talking to about what I have going on is what's their response going to be? If
mm,
their response is going to be to give me a sounding board and allow me a space to double down on everything that's wrong with me, I'm probably not going to bring it up with them because I do think that that negativity, if it's not for a specific purpose, that it could be damaging because it's giving more airtime to the problem than solutions. So, from my perspective, one of the things that I find really valuable and important is I believe that what is happening to us is incredibly important to acknowledge because it's part of properly assessing what's going on here. It is allowing me to gather more information. So the person in front of me that I'm talking to, always talking to from a perspective of, have you heard of this before? Have you ever, like, do you have experience with this? Um, do they have some holistic ways that they've handled this? Because I'm always looking at, trying to take responsibility for my health and pivot. But for me, it solely is assessing, and then it's my opportunity to pivot from the problem and move into a solution. So I may have, you just gave me 3 solutions that I could potentially look at, and I've got 2 on my own. Now I have a short list of 5, and I'm going to tune into my body and say, okay, now that I kind of have an understanding of what this is, I'm going to pivot. And I'm going to start with one of these solutions that intuitively gets pinged in my body to get curious about, whether that's to learn more information about it or to specifically start towards on that action plan. So it's like, oh, you stopped having sugar, and not having sugar helped with that particular pain. I'm going to try that for a week and see how just making that one shift does or doesn't impact what I have going on.
Mhm. Yeah, and this gets into how I've dealt with these conditions in my own life, which is I've found ways to make living with them easier on myself. So, what I wanted to do was make myself prepared for the possibility that I could have difficult days. And also, on the flip side of that, not have the expectation that I'm going to have those difficult days.
Mm.
So my just a short list of what I have going on. I have hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and I have an alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency, and there may be other things going on, who knows. But as of now, what those have really caused me to deal with the most is fatigue, chronic pain, migraines, all of the issues that come along with loose connective tissue. And that could be everything from my hearing to joint pain and swelling and everything in between, because we have connective tissue everywhere in our bodies. Um, so preparing for that, I'll just say that migraines tend to be the most debilitating for me. I can live with a lot of pain in my body and be completely fine, I think, because I've just done it for so long. But migraines are something that will knock me out for at least 2 days. And I will not be able to function. I will be bedbound, and that's it. So preparing for that looks like having a toolkit of holistic therapies and also your traditional allopathic medicine therapies, and knowing where they are and preparing the people who I live with to be able to get those for me if I need them. And then having like a my own triage assessment of where I am in the development of
Mm.
this when it hits, and what works when. And if I catch it early enough and I'm prepared, then I can usually stave off 2 days of being bedbound. So recently this happened. I went to an event for a book signing for my new book. I felt it coming on. I knew that I just hadn't slept well enough. I was stressed. It was a whole mess of factors that were leading to it. And I didn't have my medications with me.
Mm.
So when I got home, I knew what I needed to do. I attacked it quickly. I was in bed for most of the rest of the day, but I recovered enough by evening time to, make dinner, get the kids to bed, what I needed to do. So that's what preparation looks like. Make preparation simple enough that you've got like posted checklists, you have people who are looped in, you can get to things early and often, and then set that aside and kind of forget about it. Like, don't live in the space of seeing those medications every
Mm.
day, of reminding yourself that this could possibly come up, because then it's in the back of your head constantly and you're expecting that. So I put them away, I don't see them, and I live with the expectation that I'm going to wake up feeling well. And I've been dealing with an issue this week that's related to my Ehlers-Danlos diagnosis. And I just keep going to bed with the expectation that I'm going to wake up and my body is going to have healed itself and I will be well. Hasn't happened yet, but I'm just expecting that. I'm expecting wellness. I'm expecting my body to do what it needs to do to heal itself. And I live in that expectation. And I try to remember when I wake up and I have a good day and nothing feels off, it's easy to forget that there's anything wrong with me. It's easy to just gloss over the fact that I'm feeling well. So
Mhm.
instead, I try to remind myself to give like abundant gratitude for my body working well, for me feeling well, for being able to wake up and feel rested and not have pain in my body. I just try to give lots of gratitude for that because I want that to be my normal
Mhm.
and I don't want to forget it. So that's a quick intro of how I deal with
Yeah, thank
this.
you. So I think gratitude is something that sometimes in our culture it's so talked about, where everybody's like, you need to have a gratitude journal, you need to do, have gratitude, you need. I think we can talk about it so much that we can forget just how powerful it is. Like, I think it's so important for people, if you hear anything on this, I know it seems so simple, but gratitude is powerful. There is a vibrational frequency to gratitude that literally brings you up here. That is a real thing. It raises your vibration. What gratitude also does is sometimes when we have expectancy, so like when you have an illness and you expect to feel different, sometimes it can still be a slight little nuance of separation from actually being well. So when you say I expect to feel something, it suggests that you're not yet, and it's just this little nuance that's saying I'm not there right now. So your body hears I'm not well yet. But when you have that when you have, instead of expectation, you have gratitude for, man, I thank you. I wake up and I feel really good. Then genuine, not idealistic thoughts of gratitude. Now, sometimes you have to get the thoughts going before it actually takes root and you get the emotional vibration that follows it, because the thoughts are what start first. But having that feeling of genuine, like, where do I feel good? John Kabat-Zinn talks a lot about this, of when people are dealing with chronic pain, where in your body actually do you feel good? Because oftentimes there
Mhm.
is one part of your body that's hurting, and that gets all of our airtime and attention. But if we
Mm,
can go through and scan our body and we ask our body, where do I feel good? It's overshadowed by the pain. And so where do I feel good? And it's like, well, my arms feel good. And you start focusing on how good your arms feel. And then you're like, my stomach feels good. And you start thinking about your stomach. So he leads us through mindfulness exercises that allow for our body to genuinely establish the feeling of gratitude for feeling good in our body. So it's not just wishful thinking, but it's actual experience in the body with where you feel good right now. And I think that's a
mm,
really powerful exercise that's helped me, because I deal with chronic neck issues because of a broken neck when I was 16. And so I have, like Bridget, a very clear triage checklist that I go through when I start to feel pain. When I'm doing activities, I'm very mindful about prevention and making sure that I am cognizant of the way that I hold my neck, the way that screen is positioned, the way that I'm holding my phone, um, so that I don't injure myself through repeated movement that takes my neck out of alignment and then causes a series um, of symptoms that are equally debilitating. It takes
mhm,
me out for a couple of days if I get to that point. But then I also have, if I miss it, here's my checklist of things to do. Here's who I reach out to. I know how to reach out. I know who's going to be responsive in what amount of time, and that type of thing. But I don't think about that. Like you said, I have it in the back of my mind. It's something I focus on, the prevention and what I can do to stay well. So my mind's always
mhm,
like, this is how I stay well, which then says that to the universe that I'm empowered and I'm also currently already in health. Because when you're staying well, I'm well, so I'm giving gratitude for already being well. And one more thing with this, I liked your point and your distinction between preparation and expectation, because I think it's really important for people to hear the the movement or what's implied in those terms. Preparation is suggesting action. There is something actionable that you are doing, that you, whether it's the triage plan, that is action. You have developed a triage plan. If it is that you are, you have a list of physicians or people that you reach out to, that's action. But expectation is a bit of inaction, right? So there's a waiting that goes into that. So that's where I think also in that liminal space between your whatever's happening to you, moving from not feeling well to actually being well, then where you can fill up that liminal space with something that is productive is gratitude, because
Mhm.
your thoughts and your beliefs about what your condition is or where you are currently well will have like a draft. Like if 95% of my body is well, and imagine like, a bicycling crew going along, and then the one bike that's tired comes behind, and it gets the draft of the rest of the bikes in the race. It's almost like that part of you that's not well yet kind of falls behind and gets the draft of the emotional energy and belief system of the rest of this organism that is absolutely functioning fine and well. um,
Mhm.
and so it like kind of pulls along with it, with an expectation, just because of your belief system and your gratitude.
Yeah, so something I wanted to share that connects with this is I follow closely Brian Johnson's work. He's a great philosopher and scholar of the Stoics, and something that he talks about is these like life equations. And so I made a life equation for suffering because I have 4 children. As I was in the process of birthing them, I was told something by someone that really stuck with me, and that was pain and suffering are not the same thing. Pain is something you experience, but it has an end. There's a movement through it, and it's finite. There's an ending to it. Suffering doesn't necessarily have an ending. It's just something you're stuck in. And so it struck me, and this is the equation that I came up with. It is that suffering is equivalent to pain times our resistance to the pain divided by gratitude. So
Mm.
so if my pain is reasonable, but I'm not resisting it, then that takes it down quite a bit because there's no resistance to the pain. I'm not working against it. And then if I can meet it with that gratitude that you were talking about, if I can say, well, I'm really grateful that maybe my mind is tired right now and my migraine really hurts, but the rest of my body feels great and I can rest. I can just lay here in this bed and I can rest. There's nothing else I need to do right now that's taking down my resistance. And then if I say, I am so grateful that I have the space to rest, that I have supportive people around me who allow me to rest, that my body is healing itself, and that I know that this is going to be over soon. Um, that diminishes my suffering quite a bit. So it can be that our suffering is non-existent or quite a bit less than the pain that we're actually experiencing if we reduce our resistance and we bump up our gratitude. And that's what's worked for me, at least in formulating thoughts around this.
It's beautiful, yeah. And I love that equation. I think it really gives a good visual for folks. And I also think when you put that on there, I thought when you were talking about resistance, what you were describing is sometimes you're doing, like you said, you're doing the best, like you're doing the most you can. If you're resting, sometimes we have this belief that something working requires movement,
Mm,
and we don't value enough rest and inaction, which also I will say is also put along in that silence meditation, right? These are inert, looks like there's nothing going on, but that is not true. Who we are as biological organisms, we need rest. We need seasons of inaction. We
mhm,
need those moments. And so when I had this like what I was imagining, like sometimes people are like, I just got to go and I got to keep doing and I don't have time for this. They're resisting rest.
Yeah.
There's that we have this belief that we're lazy or that we're not doing enough in our lives when really sometimes the quickest route through something is it's like the pit stop. It's like when you're in a race and you're in a car race, you have
Yeah.
to take a pit stop.
Yep.
You actually have to do that. And if you just kept going and just kept going, your car is going to die. And everyone would be like, why didn't you take a pit stop? Right? But we forget we need that too. We
Yeah.
need that rest. And so there is a tremendous power that happens when we take that time to take a nap, to allow yourself to be in bed for a full day. Allow your body
Mhm.
to literally get the break that it needs. It is working by not working. It is absolutely what you can't see is that your body is regenerating. It is sloughing off all the toxins. It's allowing there to be rest and repair in your body. And so when you're done with that season, suddenly you feel so much more energy. And if you compare that level of energy that you have after a rest to when if you just would have kept going and kept going and kept going and kept going and kept going, it's no doubt that you're up here when you're done, right?
Mhm.
But you would have, if you just would have plowed through, you're either up here or you're actually just a little bit lower because it keeps taxing your body at almost immeasurably less amounts. Like you can't see it. It's
Mhm.
minuscule. It's like a child that you as a parent see every single day and you don't see their growth. But
Yep.
somebody like who hasn't seen your child for 3 months is like, oh my gosh, Callum's grown so much. And you're like, what? It's like that with anything that's happening. It's so minuscule, right?
Yeah.
To you because it's within you and it's your personal experience, but somebody outside can see things so much more clearly.
Mhm. Yeah, but that's a great example because we just had open house last night, and one of Callum's friends came up to him and said hi, and I was like, "Who is this kid?" And then Callum told me after, "Oh, that was so and so," and I'm like, "We had them at your birthday party." And then I was like, "Oh gosh, it was 2 years ago. We had them at your birthday party 2 years ago. Deeper voice, so much tall, looks like a completely different child, right?
Wow.
But I don't
Yeah.
notice that Callum looks different.
Right.
He looks just the same to me."
Exactly. And
So
that
yeah,
parent's probably
great
thinking
example.
having the same experience.
Right. Right. So great example. Yeah.
So
So
go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know, I want to know where you were going.
Oh, I was pivoting.
Yeah,
So
let's
if
do it.
you
Let's
had
pivot.
okay. So the pivot is something that I think is really actually important. Like literally the pivot I think is something that's really important to talk about with this because you don't want to pivot too soon. So
Mm,
sometimes what can happen is and I've done this. This is why I'm bringing this up where when I'm learning about the law of attraction and I'm learning that my thoughts have power and I understand that words have significant attraction in the universe to what's coming to me and my experience and my feelings about them draw it even more. I'm afraid that if I think too much about something or I feel too much fear about what I'm experiencing and what's going to happen, and I go too far down, like, what if I don't catch this early? And I'm going through that experience in my body. I'm afraid that going too far into that will mean that it's all just flying towards me, right? But what's
mm,
important is to understand that our pain is always telling us something. We have to pause. There's no universal right answer. It's not like you can stick with it for 5 minutes or you can stick with it for 15 minutes. Nobody knows what your emotional frequency is, what the extent of the intensity of your thoughts are. But what I would say is that I don't pivot until I understand where I'm at and what it's trying to tell me. So
yeah.
there is your pain is always trying to tell you something. And when something keeps coming up over and over and over and over in the universe, you haven't gotten the message. I can't tell you how many times I went through years of neck issues where the universe was trying to tell me I didn't have my triage plan right yet. I didn't have my the right types of treatment lined up for me, but I also didn't understand the underlying meaning of that pain. And
Mm,
so something that's, there is a camp of belief that what's happening inside of us, our emotions are linked to our past experiences. And many times those give us some belief systems. And so we have to hear and know what these suppressed emotions and experiences are in order for us to know what we need to face so that we can get beyond it. And I've heard people say, I don't want to face that stuff. Well, then it's just going to keep coming up over and over and over and over. That's how it is. You're a human being, and that's how we're wired, is that until we actually face something that keeps coming up, that it will keep presenting itself. And the beauty is that sometimes when we get our bodies and our minds in a place to where we're really strong, we are unearthing something that's deeper and from further back, and we should expect that. And it's okay because our mind and body is capable of handling what's coming up. And the earlier stuff won't come up until the stuff on the surface is handled first. It's like a tree trunk, and we're getting deeper and deeper and deeper into the original source or root. So for me, I love this book. Your body speaks your mind. I also think of it like Bessel van der Kolk has Your Body Keep Score, but that's a very clinical guide. This, the average person can use, and it goes through the different body parts. And you'll see that it says decoding the emotional, psychological, and spiritual messages that underlie illness. So this gives you like it's astounding how many times I'm like, ooh, I have neck pain. And then I look up something in here and I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is spooky. How
mm,
accurate it is, like where we hold different experiences in our body universally, where
mhm.
we hold them in our body, not just uniquely to us.
Yeah. Oh man, there are so many things that you just talked through that I was going to pivot into our words too. So I'm glad you went there. Of course, that's why I wanted you to do it first. But um something that I had written down that I really wanted to dig into was that my concern around speaking these things is that I know that words are connected to a thought, which is connected to a belief that's rooted in me. So if I believe something to be true, then my words will reflect that belief. Sometimes beliefs are conscious and we've created them, and sometimes they're unconscious and we've just accepted them as is without recognizing the fact that we are in control of them.
Mm,
So because that's where our words emerge from, then I started really geeking out and doing my word nerd thing around this idea of words and speaking. And I know that in magical traditions, in witchcraft and in other traditions like that, there is this concept of spells. And I really wanted to understand, because a spell is words, it's either written or it's, an incantation, it's spoken aloud. And we perform these, we call them different things, but we perform them in many different settings. Children perform them every morning at schools across our country. They say a pledge. They say the pledge to the flag. I think about this every time I'm in a classroom because I teach, and I hear them saying this and reciting it. It's a spell. It's an incantation. It's a
mm,
rooting of a belief system. Not going to get into how I feel about that one way or the other, but it just is what it is. And also, we do this in communal gathering settings when we recite things like prayers or creeds or oaths. We do it in scouts, we do it in churches. All of these come from this root word, which is a Germanic word, spell, spell. And what it means is a spell, but it also can refer to a just talk in general, just talk. storytelling, gossip, which I think is really interesting, and a sermon. Sermons come from the root word spell, the Germanic root word spell. But then I dug a little bit deeper, and there was this note on it, and this all comes from Merriam-Webster, so very, above the board, research-backed source. The next thing that was noted in this entry was that the word gospel, Gospel, also comes from the derivative of spell, the Germanic word. And gospel just means good, G-O, good, talk, a good talk or a good tale. So that got me really spinning my gears around this. A good tale, a gospel. And then the idea that words are power, and that the power they hold is when we speak them or we incant them, that they are delivering an energetic frequency or shift out into the universe. And that literally just going like this with my hand, I'm making wind, I'm moving molecules around. And the same thing happens when I speak. I move those molecules. There's energy that's being transferred. There's actually a frequency to them. And I just got, my brain started to go crazy with this. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, literally every time we speak, the tone with which we're speaking, the emphasis we place on certain words, like, how do you know someone is honest versus being sarcastic? There's a tone to the words. It's not just the words, but it's the tone with which they're delivered. It all goes back to this idea that spell is just talk. It's just telling a story. It's crafting words that deliver an energetic response and an energetic prompting out into the universe. So I went really deep on that, and I'd love to hear your thoughts around it, because I know you feel strongly about this as well.
Yeah, it's really interesting to me because it's almost like when you were describing it, I was like, "Oh, we're like putting a spell on ourselves." We're like literally when we think about our problems and what's wrong with us, and we don't use it from a lens of curiosity and assessment, and this is something that I'm just going to use to get a sense of where I'm at and where I need to shift to. When there's an
Mm-hmm.
energetic, it's a different energetic experience to be curious about it and to be talking in the framework of curiosity about what's happening to you and looking at what's like your pain from a lens of it's something that you're going to shift. There is a different
Mm-hmm.
energy and framework to looking at that very thing through a lens of, oh, these are just, it's almost like just data that's become
Mm-hmm.
very impersonal. It's just data that I'm holding out here and I'm saying, okay, this is an issue. So here's what I've got. Let me gather some information. That's very like out here. But when you have a framework or an energy around something that's happening and you're like, this is me. It's
Mm-hmm.
so intimate. It's like I'm feeling pain. I'm this or that. I'm
Mm-hmm.
and when you have this I am, it's almost putting a spell on yourself with the words. And it's drawing it to you. You're saying into the universe, this is who I am. There is not space in that kind of framework to look at this objectively and to have solutions come because there's already a belief system locked in that I am
Mm-hmm.
broken, that there's something wrong with me, versus there is a part of me that I'm looking at to shift.
Mm-hmm.
95% of me as well. So it's like, is this true? Right. And
Mm-hmm.
I'll even double down and say there have been times in my life where I felt 99% broken. If I were honest with myself in that moment, I felt 99% broken. And this is actually the moment that everything changed because once I realized I was at that point, my mind, body, and spirit years ago were at this point of I was identifying with it. I didn't see, I was so deep in it, I couldn't see because it was I am this. And it took literally, I was talking to somebody about this recently where I was like, it can take years to sink into something like that. But in one moment, a flash of light, in one moment, a truth that tells you something that is solution oriented, that allows for you to see the hope in the situation. In one moment, this is where we call it a miracle. But really,
Mm,
it's just seeing the truth of our situation so powerfully that it's a shift in our capacity to draw more of that energy very quickly and powerfully towards us. It is a pivotal moment that we can, at any juncture, even if we're at that 99% point, allowing for one sliver of, is this true? And is there something other than what this is that I can have a draft from? Just one little piece can shift and start giving some momentum to a solution that can take you in an entirely different energetic direction.
mm. Wow, yeah, I think I mean we've both had those moments that we talk about pretty openly in terms of going from that identification with our brokenness to a recognition that, like, for me it was a recognition that in this moment I can either choose to accept this spell that they've spoken. You are in heart failure, like there's a delivery of this identification, or I can turn it around, like I say, turn it around and return to sender with a note that says I do not accept. um and I had this moment and I was like, it really was interesting because it wasn't even that I believed it consciously, but everything in my body was just like, no, that's not me. Like they can't be talking about me right now because that's not me. Like I'm not finished. There's so much more that I have to do here. And and recognizing that allowed me to see the open doors that I had had my back to. It was like, well, I can't do that. Well, why can't you do that? Why can't you quit your job? Why can't you leave all this stuff behind? Why can't you go pursue something that feels right and good to you? Why not? Who says you can? So I think being able to return those words with my disapproval of them allowed me to also return to these open doors and these opportunities and these other paths that I had said I couldn't, and I was the only person saying I couldn't.
Mm,
Like, a bird in a cage with the door wide open. Well, why are you still sitting there? Like you were made to go fly freely out here in this big wide world. Why are you still sitting in there? Well, because I say I can't. Well, then start saying you can.
yes. Can
Um,
you talk a
and
little
yeah.
bit more about, like, what I hear you saying, and I appreciate this way that you look at this. You're talking about, like, we all have these identities that we've really locked into, and
Mhm,
those identities are often, um, people around us really like us being those people. It's kind of convenient for them. They get to stay who they are because we stay who we are. And when we change, they have to change. So it's
mhm,
almost like I imagine, like, you have a conglomerate here and we're all a unit. As long as I stay in my space, then everybody else gets to stay there too. But as soon as I move away, somebody else has to move in. Something has to shift to keep everything okay, right? Or else it's
mhm,
just like everything's like, what's going to happen? So there's a
mhm,
lot of, especially if the people around you aren't necessarily, if they're risk adversive or if they don't see where you're going, not everybody is okay with the uncertainty that comes from us shifting our identities. But we still get to say, um, nobody else has to understand it. But I think one of the things I'd like to hear you kind of riff on is, I heard you say that when you were following your path, you saw opportunities. And those opportunities, I heard you say, felt good, felt right. Could you talk a little bit more about, like, when you see an opportunity, some people see an opportunity as a distraction, it's not an opportunity.
mhm,
So how do we determine that something can be trusted and followed? What's kind of
mhm.
the What does that feel like?
So I'll preface this by saying it's really easy to make bold decisions when you're staring death in the face and like you've come to the edge of the cliff. Like it's really easy to make bold decisions then. It's really easy for me to speak truth when I'm in a great amount of pain. I've got no energy left for the BS. All I've got energy for is to be able to speak my truth and move forward in that. There's nothing else left. Like I've left everything else behind. So it was easy for me in that moment to go, oh, if I stay alive, like if I choose life right now, if I choose to say that I'm not finished with this and there's still more for me to do, then what is that more for me to do? Like, let's get back to the basics. What did I say when I was a kid? God, I just want to do whatever you have for me to do. That's what I want to do. Where did I go wrong in that path? Well, I went wrong because I was trying to come up with things myself. Maybe I should do this because I want to stay here and I want to, take more time at this school, or this path just didn't feel quite right. So I'm just going to move to another path that doesn't feel quite right because I can't figure it out right now anyway. So I'd made a whole bunch of decisions, not based on my true inner compass, like my intuition and my gut, but based upon like, well, what's not as bad as the other bad option? Not the right option, just not as bad. Like, okay, this is acceptable. This is good enough. So I was living this good enough, good enough, good enough, good enough, because I was afraid that if I went for the highest good, like my true good, like my authentic path, that I would fail. That's what I was afraid of. Well, I couldn't possibly do that thing because I see other people out there doing that, but I'm not them. So I would probably fail. Well, what a crappy way to live your life. Like that sucks. At least if I try it, then I'm moving in the right direction. So it's really easy to say, oh, I'm going to try it, when it's like, well, either try it or you die. Like that was, I don't know that that's true, but that was what I felt was most true in that moment. It was like God saying, are you going to do what you said you were going to do, or are you finished? Like you came here for a reason. Would you like to follow that reason, or would you like to tap out and be done and wait for the next time around? And I really felt like there was this whole conversation that probably took split seconds where I was just like, I am not done. I don't accept this. And I'm not going to say that sitting in that hospital bed that I had all these realizations of what my exact right path was. All I committed to was I'm done with the good enough and I'm going after the best, what's best for me, like what you have for me. And I don't know what that looks like yet, but now I'm open. Like we have this communication channel and I'm willing to listen and follow your lead. And so I knew a couple right steps, but I did not know the whole path. And I still don't know the whole path. That's something that God and I have talked about frequently. I would like to know the whole path ahead. That'd be great.
Do we
If I
really?
could see the roadmap.
We really want to see the whole path. I don't
No,
know
of
that we'd
course
walk
not.
it if we saw the
No.
whole path.
No, absolutely not. No, because God has reminded me over and over again when things have happened and God's been like, well, this was the whole path. You weren't ready to see this when you asked me.
Amen.
I was not ready.
No.
So no, I don't want to know the whole path, but I get these little snippets of the next right step. And I've learned to respond immediately now to those. Like this morning, I had such a dumb one. It was so silly, but I knew that it was like God speaking, and I still don't understand why. I think it's just sometimes God is like, hey, are you listening? Like, check in. So I'm in my room and I'm about to leave my room. I just gotten dressed and I turn around and I look at my bed and it was like, make your bed. I'm like, I don't want to make my bed. What do I need to make my bed for? Make your bed. I was like, oh my God, okay, I'm making my bed. So I made my bed. Why? No idea. Who knows? It's super minor in comparison. But those are like little exercises to strengthen that listening muscle. so that when I get asked big things like, hey, go give your car to that person, you know, or whatever it may be, I'm just used to saying yes and doing the thing.
So
Yeah.
for the person listening, I think, you don't have to have an existential crisis or an actual like moment.
So
We
I
happen
really
to
muffed that
have
one up.
had, we happen to have, um, but what I think the transferability to what you're saying to people listening, if you are in a moment where you are having a moment where you're having something different in your life from a health perspective, that you don't want to look like what it is. The reality is you have a choice to make a different choice.
Mhm.
You are going to tell yourself that you don't because you don't want to move slightly so that other people have to move in. But the reality is you get to feel good in this life, and other people's comfort at you being where you're at to not have to make some shifts doesn't mean it's okay for it is actually okay for other people to feel slight discomfort so that you can get more comfortable and feel less discomfort in your own life. You get
Mhm.
to have a life that is free of, and you talk about, Bridget, disease and the root of that, right? You get to have a life where you get to make different choices and you get to be curious about maybe there's six different ways that you could approach this. Some people want to go a very traditional Western way. That is at your discretion to do. But Western is their tools are surgery and medicine. So if you want surgery and medicine, then that's probably the avenue that you take. Western's also really good at letting you know an accurate assessment of something that's happening. Like sometimes I'll get an X-ray and I'll find out, well, where is my neck in the whole scheme of things? I need to know where I'm actually at to start on an Eastern approach to know, is this making a difference? I'm not going to just do these exercises to strengthen my neck. I'm not going to do these chiropractic sessions and make these pivots and not assess 6 months later, has it made a difference? But if I can do something myself and I can exercise and make myself stronger, which by the way makes this organism function more efficiently in general, and I need to do anyway. So why wouldn't I take accountability and strengthen myself in a way that is strategically according to what my body needs, given what the Western world is telling me? Here's this. But I'm not going to go get surgery. I'm not going to take medicine to stop the pain. Why, instead of taking medicine that's going to give me seven more conditions that now I have to manage and probably take more medicine? People who I know that take medicine start with one and now they're taking 12, right? So now they have all these side effects. When in actuality, they could take one x ray, see what it tells you, make some pivots and changes, do some things differently, move my body, reassess, and now I don't have to have surgery or take this medicine because I've had a hybrid approach to my healthcare that allows for me to take responsibility and see some changes. And then that gives me more personal agency. That actually says to me, oh my gosh, what I did made a difference. And then that transfers to other parts of my life where I'm wanting to make some changes. And I said, hey, I'm competent to do that. Remember that time that I had this
Mhm.
issue and I was able to make some changes and it actually produced some results? It has some, like, instead of the locus of control of my health and wellness being outside of me, it's a doctor, it's a system, it's a hospital, it's me. You're giving me a little bit of information that I'm using to make some shifts in my life with people that are helping me make those slight shifts and adjustments so that my body is created innately to work appropriately and be in health. This
Mhm.
system, God made me in order to work and function and heal on my own. We actually, 20,000 years ago, didn't have doctors. It's actually just made in a way. We didn't have hospitals in ER. It's made in a way to heal itself. We have distanced ourselves from that knowledge and understanding that we have the capacity because we are designed in a way to heal. We just have to get
Yeah.
back to that inner state to hear what the universe is telling us to do and how to use it.
Hmm. Two ways that I want to go here, and I'm not sure which I'm going to go, but you started talking about dis-ease and disease, and I'll pull apart that word and just break it down because it's really important for people to hear that ease is not the same thing as easy. Ease, EASE, actually means physical comfort, the undisturbed state of the body. So ease is the body's natural undisturbed state
Mm,
without inputs, without, it just will be at a state of rest, and that state of rest is called ease. It is peace of mind, which I think is also hand in hand with this whole concept, because we're talking about how the mind is like the control center for the body, and it's tranquility. And you
mm,
know that peace, how high that is on the scale of frequency. So
600.
if we're at peace and we're resting and we're undisturbed, then our bodies will naturally be in a state of ease.
Mhm,
Dis-ease throws off the equilibrium of our bodies. So it is not a natural state. Our bodies are not designed to be in a state of dis-ease. And so what where Western medicine, I think, sometimes falls a little short is that we're not so interested in the root of what is causing the dis-ease. And we know that there's always a root causing dis-ease because our body's natural state is ease.
mhm.
So if we start to excavate, and that's the scary part for people, we start to excavate what the root is of this thing. The reason why so many of us are a little bit scared of going there is because often the root of it is a disturbed state of mind, because ease means peace of mind and
Mhm.
tranquility. And therefore, that control center, like if something is wrong with my computer, usually there's something wrong with that main functioning circuitry that controls everything else. There is a
Right,
virus, interesting that we call it that, a virus or something that has disturbed the natural state of functioning. Well,
right.
sometimes when my mind is off, I'm not even aware of what has caused my mind to go off out of that peace of mind state. And if I were to get really honest and start excavating it, what comes up might be something that is really messy and scary and I don't want to touch.
Mhm.
So I don't know, I'm just getting this image of like if you're planting a garden and you want your garden to grow optimally, one of the first and best things you can do is check the quality of the soil. But you get into the soil and like there's this thick clay that's not going to allow the roots to penetrate deep enough, or there's grubs that are there. And then you've got all these other messes that you have to deal with. And some people just want to lay this stuff down and plant the garden and let it go. And it's not going to grow optimally unless you've checked the quality of that soil and you've gotten that right first. So this is the
Yeah,
same, transfer that idea.
yeah, absolutely. I think for me, one of the last things that I want to talk about, which is associated with what you just brought up, is for the listener or viewer. If you are thinking, well, where do I begin? If I'm going to, try to have this optimism and I want to, approach what we've been talking about. For me, I think a great entry point. I'm always thinking about. I'm trying to have my mind, body, and spirit be as aligned and as high vibration as possible. That is if I do nothing else, if I don't even know the root of what's happening, if I don't even know where to pivot or how to assess at this point, my resting knowledge and filter that I put everything through is how can I act right now and strengthen my mind, body, or spirit? And sometimes I don't have it in me to approach one of them. It's like, I don't have it in me to exercise right now. I don't have it in me to do like work on my body. Well, do you have it in you to sit quietly and allow for space for spirit to come through and communicate with you? Because that is actually a spiritually strengthening activity that's going to allow for information to come to you. Do you have it in you to listen to an audiobook on the way that you got nudged to listen to? I highly recommend Radical Remission by Dr. Kelly Turner. There's also the Dr. Joe Dispenza work, which talks about within our body the dissonance between what's happening in our neurocircuitry and alignment with our body. So, like Dr. Kelly Turner's Radical Remission, what I love is you don't have to have cancer and have stage 4 cancer or any type of cancer and want to be in a place of health to utilize her work. For me personally, I use it as a prevention plan. She outlines 9 factors that people who had stage 4 cancer actually can reverse their cancer and go into radical remission by utilizing these 9 concepts. For me, that's a prevention plan. It means that isn't my body is an ecosystem where disease is going to have a hard time taking root because my body is the soil is so good that that can't stand in there, right? And so for me, focusing on my mind, body, and spirit. For me, increasing my vibration, which means focusing on peace and love and joy and rest and things that are going to bring me peace and love and joy. Focusing on those higher frequencies. The higher your vibration and the stronger your mind, body, and spirit, the more capable you are to handle anything that's coming at you. You have the mind to approach it and pivot and move towards this other way. You have a body that can be responsive to handling disease when it starts to come up. You have a spirit that believes in everything in you that you are going to get through this, and you see that. So, wherever you can make one small, it doesn't mean you have to do everything, wherever you can make one small shift in your day to increase your mind, body, and spirit or increase your vibration, that's where the work can be when you don't know what else to do or where to begin. Start there.
And I'll just add that one, not necessarily easy, but approachable place to start is taking note of the thoughts and the beliefs that you're reciting to yourself within yourself every moment of your day. So I've always got a script running. Sometimes it's music that's playing in the back of my head, sometimes it's words, but there's almost always something running through my head. And becoming conscious of what that script is that you're running, and then reprogramming that script to run what you want it to be saying about yourself is really, really important.
Yeah, beautiful.
So, yeah.
Super important. All right, everybody. So hopefully that's given you something to think about. And I think we would both be really interested that if you had some realizations from our discussion that you feel would be helpful to other viewers, please drop that in the comments. If there is something that you want us to riff on related to this topic that we didn't talk about, I would really like to hear that because we want to be responsive to what your growing curiosities are, and all benefit from that. When we hear questions or comments, we're part of this experience with you. So we really enjoy learning from each of you and your perspective and line of sight. So thank you for listening today to this topic and any contributions that you have after you've heard it.
Yeah. And a special thanks to Asheville artist Melissa Moss for our cover art from her work, Our Magical Life. You can learn more about Melissa and her work at melissamossart.com. And of course, thank you to Cloud Cult for our podcast music from their live recording of their song, There's So Much Energy in Us. Find out more about Cloud Cult at their website, cloudcult.com. And of course, listeners, to you, thank you for being here, for spending your time with us. And we're sending you all peace, love, and light.